Hi there, it's Adam Dewhirst for Escape Technology, bringing you what's new in ZBrush 2018. So the big release for this version of ZBrush is the Sculptris Pro mode. So this is a super cool addition, very helpful. It's super easy to use. All you're going to do is up here in your top menu, this little S icon, if you click that, you'll turn Sculptris Pro mode on. And you'll know it's on because you get this purple cursor. As you use your brush, it's basically going to create geometry as you move it. So it's tessemating the geometry as you go. It will function both to create geometry from your positive action, your Z add, but also if you hit smooth, it will work in that function too. So it adds geometry wherever you react to the surface. Equally, it works if you subtract as well. So it's very adaptable. In addition to which, if you reduce your brush size, it will also adapt the amount of tessellation to that. So a smaller brush size will create more tessellation, more detail, and a larger brush size will create less. So it is adaptive. Now, you can play with those settings as well. The settings for Sculptris Pro are in the stroke menu, and you can drop down to the Sculptris Pro menu section here, and you can see you've got a bunch of settings. Let's just dock that to one side. Sculptris Pro both tessemates and it decimates, and some of those settings are adaptable in here. So what do I mean by tessemating and decimating? Well, everyone should be familiar with decimating, where you reduce your mesh's poly count and optimize it. Tessemating is what we've got on screen right now. It's increasing the resolution, and if I bring up two spheres, hopefully you'll be able to see a good example of this. So let's have a look. Let's go to our subtools. Right, we've got two spheres here on our low res mesh with Sculptris Pro mode on. As you draw, let's switch up to a standard brush. As you draw, it tessemates, so it adds resolution. But on a high res mesh, where you've already got resolution, as you draw, it will decimate. So it's going to reduce the amount of resolution there. It's basically providing the appropriate amount of resolution for the shape that you've created. And that will function and will work for both smooth and for so smooth here we can add resolution, and so it adapts the brush size. Now what if you want to turn that function off? Well, that's what the combined function here does. So if we go to our high res mesh, if you turn combined off, it no longer uses both your Z add and Z sub to tessemate or decimate. It'll only tessemate. So as you sculpt, it's only going to add resolution. It doesn't matter how big I make this brush to try and reduce that, it'll only add. If you smooth, it will only decimate. So the turning combined off will separate out those two functions. Again, let's try that on low res. With combined off, any form of sculpting will tessemate, but no matter how big I make my brush, it's never going to decimate until I hit smooth, so it separates the two of them. Adaptive size, let's turn combined back on. Adaptive size is basically changing the tessemation based on your brush size. So if we get a nice clean sphere here, normally with adaptive size on, if you're a small brush, you make lots of tessemation. If you're a large brush, you make slightly less. It adapts to how much detail you need. If we turn adaptive size off, it's always going to stick at that one resolution, no matter how big or very small I make that brush, it's always going to stick at that one resolution. And you can change that size in this subdivide size menu here. So a larger setting will give you much larger polygons, it'll basically give you less tessemation, and a lower setting will give you much more tessemation. So all it does is it reduces that adaptive size to this slider bar. So it's a very useful tool and can be used in a number of different ways. The obvious one is obviously if you're sculpting something from scratch, you can use it almost like a live Dynamesh. So if I pull out a new shape, let's get a sphere here, we'll make Polymesh 3D, and with Sculptris Pro mode on, as I sculpt, it's basically going to add that detail as I need it. So if I'm sculpting Let's set the horns here. Let's use just the normal snake hook. It's going to add all that detail. Even if I want to subtract and make eye sockets, it's going to add that. And on brushes like Damn Standard as well, so let's say sculpting in a lovely little smile here, it's going to add that detail as I work. So it's very, very useful, saves you going back and forth with Dynamesh, and it's a super quick and efficient way to work. How I've been using it lately is to use it to add detail. So here I've got this sculpt of Zangief from Street Fighter. And this is an old sculpt I had, but I'm picking it up to work on some detail now. My computer is not great, and I have an issue with once I get to a certain poly count, it starts to chug. So it's at about 3.5 million right now. I could set it higher and mask bits. It's going to take its time, but what I can use with Sculptris Pro mode on, let's just make sure that our geometry is frozen. It is. And if I zoom in and turn on wire, and let's go to something like the Damn Standard. Let's say I want to sculpt something here. Let's make sure it's on and everything is set to where it should be. Yeah, as I sculpt, you can see, let's zoom in a little bit more, it's basically adding geometry where it thinks I need it. So it allows me, it's going to allow me to basically add detail without cranking up and subdividing the whole mesh, which is super useful if, like me, you've got some slight problems with your memory, or you're using an old computer or work computer, something that maybe can't crank out at high resolution. So it's adaptable to both refining geometry and to making stuff from scratch. So give it a go. Sculptris Pro, available from your top menu right here. Really easy to use.